Hello, I'm Ed Markey, Senator from Massachusetts, and it's with a heavy heart that I joined the Burma Task Force to mark the 4-year anniversary of a terrible campaign to wipe out an entire group of people, the Rohingya. On that date, Burma's military and security forces began its pre-orchestrated clearance operation that bulldozed villages, killing tens of thousands and prompting hundreds of thousands to flee to neighboring Bangladesh to save their own lives. Justice delayed is justice denied for the Rohingya. It is long past time that the United States joined the United Nations, many in the non-governmental community, and our allies to call the crimes by their accurate name: genocide. A genocide determination will make businesses and countries think twice about dealing with Burma's military junta, which will deny it the resources and legitimacy which it craves. The 700,000 who fled violence to Bangladesh, half of whom were children, face physical and psychological scars that may never heal. The architect of the genocidal action is now the self-appointed Prime Minister of Burma, making the return of the Rohingya perilous and unwise for the foreseeable future. Our job is to have their backs, and as such, we must work with the government of Bangladesh to ensure that we are not just providing life-saving aid, but also educational programming to arm the next generation of Rohingya with a more prosperous and secure future than the one before. That is what our job has to be. Holocaust survivor and famed author Elie Wiesel once wrote, "We must take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim." I applaud the Burma Task Force by taking that creed to heart in all that you do. You are doing God's work here on earth. Thank you for what you do every single day.
And yes, welcome everybody. This is Adam Carroll, UN Program Director for Justice for All and Team Lead for Burma Task Force. While serving for 37 years in the US House of Representatives, Massachusetts Senator Ed Markey has been both a champion of children's education, but also of the human rights of the Rohingya people. Recently, he reintroduced legislation directing the Department of State to issue a Rohingya genocide determination. He has also called on the Biden administration to cut off the Burmese military's oil and gas revenues and for the international community to impose an arms embargo against the genocidal military regime. I guess I'm going to start off with a brief description of what we're going to be doing today. And that is, 4 years after the Burmese military attacked the Rohingya population and sending another wave of 750,000 men, women, and children fleeing their homeland in Rakhine State, we faced the realization that with the Burmese military in power through a military coup 6 months ago, that repatriation back to their homes will not happen in the foreseeable future. Therefore, the excuses that governments make to not provide education for their refugee populations, these are empty excuses. We've been hearing from the Rohingya themselves who are asking us to emphasize the needs of the rising generation, children's needs that are ignored by too many political leaders. Earlier this summer, we launched a report as part of our Let Rohingya Learn campaign, focused on Bangladesh, India, and Malaysia, as well as Burma itself. So what can we do? Let's start by hearing from Rohingya about what they want. With a combination of video and live speakers, today we will be hearing first Rohingya leaders about their urgent needs and priorities. Second, from allies in humanitarian and in human rights NGOs, explaining international legal requirements and opportunities for action. And then we will end with a discussion about what we can do, how you and I can both help. So I'm going to now move to our first video, which is, I should say that there's a number of speakers. Sharifa Shakira of Rohingya Women's Network for Development, Rais Tinmal of Rohingya Human Rights Network, Osama Siddiqui of Rohingya Welfare Association, and also Kamal Ahmed, founder of the Asian University for Women. So please see the video.
Hello, my name is Sharifa Shakira. I am a founder and director of Rohingya Women Development Network. Our aim is to empower Rohingya women from different skill set, build women leaderships, which is very important in our community, and at the same time rebuild our community which been destroyed by the Myanmar government. In my experience, I have worked with so many Rohingya men, women, children, especially with women who've been trafficked, the victim of survivors, the victim of trafficking, the victim of smuggling, and victim of so many other things. These people came to Malaysia with the hope of getting a better education access, protection, better future. Unfortunately, the reality is different. They don't have access to education. They don't have protection. They have no future as a refugee in Malaysia. There are different organizations, different NGOs are trying to give education to the Rohingya children. Unfortunately, the education is not that successful over there, as they don't have formal textbook, formal education system in their schools. When they don't receive the formal education and their education is not been recognized, these young girls especially become the victim of different people. They have to marry in a young age because they have no other choice. The young boys who been have to work in a very young age, child labor take place, and so many other things. Because refugees live with the daily wages, daily basis of their incomes, and we want to see justice to be served to the Rohingya community. And I believe education is the only one of the way which can give justice to Rohingya people. So in this day, I would like to request all, all of you who are watching and the international community to provide educations to the Rohingya community, because that's the only sustainable opportunity that Rohingya community can have. Thank you so much.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. My name is Rais. I'm a Rohingya from Akyab, and I lead Rohingya Human Rights Network and Rohingya Children's Project. a registered charity and a not-for-profit currently registered in Canada. I want to thank Justice for All for this incredible initiative called Let Rohingya Learn on the 4th anniversary of the 2017 massacre. Imam Malik Mujahid, as well as Dr. Alia, Sister Monia, Sister Sadia, have been very instrumental in helping support our schools and vocational training centers in the refugee camps. We run a network of schools in Balukali, Tangkali, Kutupalong, and also No Man's Land, spanning about 1,500 students, both male and female, a staff of teachers and volunteers and caretakers to run these schools that are very grassroots in nature. Running these schools do come with their own challenges, specific obstacles to make them happen. First of all, there's challenges from the authorities. It's very difficult to sustain schools. We've had our schools shut down a few times. As you all know, that education is only legal up until grade 5, a little bit extended to grade 7, and a pilot project that recently was promised a couple of years ago after COVID, just before COVID shutdown began, but did not come into fruition to have education extended until grade 9. So authorities' challenge is a big obstacle that we constantly face, especially amongst refugees who are not registered with formal paperwork inside the refugee camps. Second challenge comes from people, from my own people, and this is a cultural challenge, as a matter of fact. A lot of times kids are discouraged to go and get education because it's considered non-Islamic education, or education that's not confined to memorization of the Quran is not considered a very desirable thing. So this is a misnomer, and it's rampant in that part of the world, unfortunately, among my people as well. And it's very hard to overcome that obstacle at times to convince parents to send their kids to school. Thirdly, we've got, and very importantly, we've got challenges specifically pertaining to our sisters. A lot of times sisters who are as young as, in their age of puberty are required to get married and take care of their households. And even if they're enrolled in schools, by the time they get into grade 7 or grade 8, they're removed from their classroom so that they can go and get married and take care of their new families. And this is a tremendous challenge that needs to be overcome in the sphere of education of my people. Of course, not to mention, it's so hard to find female teachers who are qualified. And speaking of qualification, that brings us to the final challenge that I want to mention, and that's quality of education in the refugee camps. A lot of NGOs or even grassroots schools like ourselves that make an effort to provide education does not come into terms with the bare minimum quality that is met. Forget about international schools, but also compared to schools within Bangladesh and in the region. Bangladesh, of course, has got some of the finest schools, but mediocre schools in the surrounding of the refugee camps, the education quality in the camps do not compare to that.
Being a Rohingya community member who born in host country, it was always difficult for us to get an access for education, especially when we were considered stateless. So having all the pain of education access and thinking about our new generation in refugee camps, we started something called Rohingya Welfare Association Schools with a group of Rohingya friends who are living abroad. We've been active for some time until the COVID lockdown started, but we are looking forward to expand this project. My special request for host countries where our Rohingya community are living, please get an access for our new generation for proper education. and higher education as well, so they can stand on their feet and they can contribute in the societies where they're living.
I think access to education is probably the most important asset for any refugee. You know, think about it. They don't have a country, they have been uprooted, they have probably gone through enormous amounts of trauma in the process of being uprooted and having to flee. There is, you know, many cases, refugee families have lost family members. They live in generally in sort of in dire situations and settings. So what is there to give them hope other than the idea that they can actually, they're as smart as anybody else and they can get that education, to both from their getting their own personal esteem, but also from the point of view of making something out of a life that has been quite unkind to them. And what you see is also that in a lot of countries, the host governments will allow refugees to go to primary school, maybe secondary school, but they will not let them go to university. So we felt at the Asian University for Women that it was particularly important for us to create opportunities for refugees from anywhere to come to this institution, because there is no other place in the world that says if you're a refugee, you're welcome here.
Okay, I'm here back with you all. Those were some voices, mostly of Rohingya, whom we know well, who are letting us know their perspective on needs, the urgent needs for education. In a moment, I'm going to introduce Imran Fazl Mohammed Haq, who has recently been working with us as program associate, but is also a long-standing member of the Rohingya Cultural Society, Cultural Center of Chicago. He has struggled for many years to obtain an education, and he can speak to that. I did want to mention that the last speaker just now, Kamal Ahmed, who is founder and president of the Asian University for Women, he was speaking as part of a program that we funded and supported that had an event yesterday that I was part of called Rise for Rohingya. And they are also trying to promote education. And there's very little access to higher education has been stated. But our next speaker, Imran, is actually going to university now in the US. So I hope Imran is here with us. I understand he's been cited as an attendee. Can somebody find him? Whoever is in charge of the technical side. And let me know if you're able to find him. And if not, yes, here I see him. He's a panelist. If you could just put him on the screen. It's all yours, Imran. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Brother Adam. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I hope all of you are doing well and enjoying the summer. So let me start with the camp. You know, it's been 4 years. So when refugee left in 2017, we thought, you know, there would be a solution soon. But it's been 4 years and there is no hope at all. And we don't know what's going to happen. So nearly 1 million refugees, and half of them are children, and they don't have access to education. They don't have access to proper shelter, almost nothing. So they are just going to be there, only God knows for how long. I left when I was very young. I was in Bangladesh. I didn't see any opportunity when I was there. Like I was young, I wanted to get an education, but I didn't have any opportunity there, and I didn't see that anything would change very soon. So I left. I went to Malaysia. I was in Malaysia for such a long time, and when I was in Malaysia, I saw refugees, children. They were just working in constructions because in Malaysia, in Indonesia, in India, in Bangladesh, we are allowed to get a refugee status, but we are not uh, allowed to go to school. We are not legally allowed to work. So there is no opportunity. So, and if we are not allowed to work legally, so how are we going to survive? All these questions, revolved around in my head, and I just had no option. So I heard about Australia, and I left Malaysia. I went to Indonesia by boat again. And when I was in Indonesia, I was arrested by the Indonesian authority, and they put me in the detention center in Manado. And I was detained there for nearly 2 years. In the camp, we had nothing. We didn't have access to phones. We didn't have access to books. We didn't have access to pen. For 2 years, we had really nothing. And every day was just like overwhelming and heartbreaking because there were so many refugees, young children. They were just hopeless with nothing. And after 2 years, I received my refugee status when I was in the camp, and I was released out in the community. But in the community, again, I was not allowed to work. I was not even allowed to leave the city when I was in Indonesia. So I didn't see a future when I was there. And there were many Rohingya who were waiting for 10 years, 15 years to be resettled in a third country. I didn't see that it would happen anytime soon because there were so many refugees who were waiting. And I took another risk, and I went to Australia by boat again. And when I reached Australia in 2013, but the Australian government changed their refugee policy in 2013. So anyone who came by boat in Australia, the Australian authorities sent the refugees and asylum seekers to their offshore camps. One was in Papua New Guinea, and the other one was in Nauru. I was sent to Papua New Guinea, and I was detained there for 5 years, from 2013 to 2018. And it was really heartbreaking because I thought Australia would treat refugees like human beings. As a Rohingya, as a stateless person, I had some good expectation from the Australian authority, but it was completely opposite. So for 5 years, we were detained in the camp, and in my compound there were nearly 500 refugees, and there were nearly 50 refugees in each room, and we were tortured physically, mentally, in every way, because their mission, their aim was to send the refugees and asylum seekers back to their countries where they were not safe. As a Rohingya, so it's really complicated because there were other refugees. They were, in some ways, they were lucky because they had the opportunity to go back to their country because they had passports, and they had a country. But for Rohingya, they didn't have any opportunity. If the Australian government kept them there for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, they wouldn't have any opportunity to get out of that place because we are stateless. We don't have a country, and our country don't accept us as its citizen. So for 5 years, I didn't know how I would survive. But after a week, I started learning because I saw pain and injustices in the camp, but I didn't have the language to, speak for my rights. So I started learning when I was in the camp in Australia's offshore detention center, and I started teaching myself, and then I started writing. My English was very basic. I didn't have many words. I struggled a lot at the beginning, but I resisted all the hardships, and I taught myself. I started writing, and I've been published around the world. So now I'm just gonna talk to you about the education. Why? This is the question that we have to understand. Why is education important for Rohingya or other refugees? For example, I was there for 5 years in Australia's detention center. They didn't give me any opportunity. I could have finished my bachelor in 5 years. They spent billions of dollars just to torture refugees and asylum seekers for 5 years. There are still refugees and they have been there for 8 or 9 years, and they're spending billions of dollars. Just doesn't make sense. So now, they just send me here with nothing and I'm starting from the scratch. They could have spent that money to educate me. I would have been ready to contribute to this world when I came to the United States. That's why education is important for the Rohingya. There is no future, and we don't see that they will be able to go back to Myanmar anytime soon, because the whole conversation has shifted. Now everyone is talking about the military coup, and they are talking about other issues. So again, Rohingya subject is forgotten again. So it happened again and again and again, and it will happen. It will just continue because there is we are not just talking about one issue. There are many other issues, and Rohingya will be forgotten again. And I want to thank the Burma Task Force to think about the Rohingya people and their education, because it's so important, and they are going to be stuck in the refugee camp for many years. But they don't have to waste their lives. They don't have to waste their years in the camp. If they have access to education, they will be able to thrive. When they leave the refugee camp, they will be ready to contribute to this world. And also, when we were in our country, we were deprived of education because the military, the government of Burma didn't want us to be involved in the political history. They didn't want us to learn the history of our own country. They wanted us to be excluded, not included. So when refugees left in 2017, we saw so many cases. There were so many things happened, but our people didn't have the language and the understanding to explain what happened, because they didn't have education. They were not allowed to go to school. When they managed to save their life, came to Bangladesh, they didn't have language. They didn't have any idea what would happen because they were deprived of education. Now, now they are safe. They are in Bangladesh camp. The international community has access to the camp. And I think it's so important for the international community to focus on Rohingyas education. We have to let them learn, because if they don't learn, injustice will continue, and our people will lose many generations, and people will continue to suffer the trauma they face.
Thank you, Brother Imran. Thank you very much for sharing that personal testimony and those clear words for us. We're going to show a 1-minute video of a young Rohingya boy in the camps who could have been you, perhaps, 10 years ago. So let's see the quick video.
তো তন্নাংকিনা আমার তুই হবছরিস তুই এটা ফন্না হকলাস ফরস হড ফরস এরপরে ইনর বাবুতে কিছু হজে
আমার নাম ওই দিয়ে আছে এরপর আমি তো গিয়ে কেম ওয়ান ব্লক F9 এখন না করে দিন 5 ক্লাস
তোর বয়স হবছরে
13 বছর
13 বছর তো হাত ক্লাস ফরত দিন হডে ফরত দা স্কুল আছে
স্কুল না এটা গরু গরু করার মাসে
এনজিও তো স্কুল হানো না এন্দেলা হাত ক্লাস করি বললা
না দে
তো তোরা ফরত দিন কি কিতাব কি
বাংলা সাবজেক্ট
বর্মার কিতাব জিন তোরা স্কুলত এটা হইতে এটা হগলা সুজস
এটা 3 ক্লাস হয়ে
3 ক্লাস তখন তুই 7 ক্লাসত তোর মমিকে আরো পড়ি বললাম মনে আছে না
আছে
তো মমিকে পড়িয়ারে তুই যত ফান্না বজ্জাব তুই তো কি বইন্দ মনের ডরলে ইঞ্জিনিয়ার আচ্ছা ইঞ্জিনিয়ার বনিয়ারে তুই মানে আর কোমল্লা কি ফায়দা করে ফেরিবি
কোমল্লা ফায়দা করে যেতে এটা বোঝানো তো দিয়া না তাই মতো আছে তো এটা হলো তো বাদ দিয়ে আর হয়ে যাবে হলো তো সোলা তো ওয়ান আর হয়ে যাবে 3 দিন আর হয়ে যাবে
আচ্ছা শুকরিয়া
Okay, you know, we have partnered with a young Rohingya in the camps in Cox's Bazar who's been collecting video footage, and this is a work in progress, so some of this will be improved. But we have a video that we didn't play in the beginning. I believe our tech folks can find it. This is the one that we were going to introduce the program with originally. So I'm wondering if we could play that now. This is also including footage of the camps and of interviews with some young children that Abdullah collected for us. And you know, it really speaks to their hopes for the future, and that these hopes are being denied. And then I will kick the conversation over to Imam Malik to introduce our next speaker. But let's go to the video. This is the original one that our colleague Baba has been working on, and hopefully we can line that up now. For decades, Rohingya children have been forced to remain illiterate. First, this was true in their homeland of Rakhine State, Burma. Denial of education was part of the policy of genocide. But now these same young survivors of persecution and mass atrocities are prevented from obtaining their education. Please hear the voices of these children.
Atukan ashada bisi bisi fanna bari doctor bani balla. Ekka fanna bari bar daira ko doctor bani doctor hoyale anar ko mara fayda kujum gori machare mana dana bichu.
How will these children make their dreams come true? The nations hosting Rohingya refugees have not allowed these children access to school, especially for older children. In Bangladesh, over 500,000 Rohingya children have been deprived of a future. On August 25th, 2017, after decades of increasing oppression of the Rohingya Muslim population, the Burmese military committed genocide against the community in Rakhine State. Now, with over 600,000 Rohingya refugee children in the crowded camps of Cox's Bazar, the government of Bangladesh has restricted children's access to schools. The 2021 military coup put the perpetrators of genocide in charge. There can be no return anytime in the foreseeable future. So this cruel policy kills children's dreams for the future. Now let's hear from several more young people living in the camps.
I go Panagore, engineer bani bade, notun sijakana lain komor fayda. Charala tamanna bodara tomoro kokil bonium kokil bonara manchara hojari bodi dinara
Rohingya children deserve the same as our children. Rohingya are our children. As the slogan goes, leave no child behind. But to make that plan a reality, we need your help. Let Rohingya learn. Thanks. And now we'll move the spotlight to Imam Malik. Welcome.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much. It's good to hear voices of people who are really doing their best. Look at Brother Imran's struggle. Just to go to school, he had to risk his life from boat to boat, country to country. Thank God our country is here. He's finally here. He's dedicated to education. May Allah bless him with the best. But what about 600,000 children in the camps? You see, 2 generations are already lost. In 1982 was the year they took away the citizenship. And since they are not citizen, they were using their own logic to say, hey, you cannot go to school. But Rohingya have sabr, strength, and they're very smart people. They suddenly converted absence of education into creating madrasa after madrasa. And they had a university, Jamia Ahmadiyya, several hundred students and close to 150 professors. I met one of the graduates. I can tell you that graduate was smarter than most of the imams I have met in America. But then they came for the final solution. By that time, 2 generations of Rohingyas were lost without education. Yes, some were educated because they were able to bribe themselves. You know, Burma military is subject to bribing, and a lot of people can bribe and get things done. So yes, some got education one way by hook or crook. Now they're in Bangladesh. They're safe, definitely, in worst possible situation. I mean, we created a little office there, a Burma task force, when we were initially, you know, I arrived there within weeks, people start coming, and they were still coming in front of me, and it was monsoon and mud all over. And within that mud, with that little plastic and a bamboo, they're still in the same shape there. And within there, they have started madrasas and all that, because Bangladeshi government does not allow them to study beyond a 3rd grade. Is it human? Is it legal? A 3rd generation is about to be lost. 600,000 children. They cannot, if they're teenagers, they cannot do a job. Doing a job is illegal. They cannot get out of the camp because that is illegal. It's barbed wire. Even when fire came, they cannot run away from the fire because it's barbed wire all around. And they cannot get to school. What do you expect 600,000 children to do if there's nothing else to do? There's a very little space, 2-3 places walking up and down all day. I spotted few areas, open areas, where flood water comes. When there's no flood, they can play, you know, some games and all that. But other than that, and Rohingyas are the first one who want to go back home because they're sick and tired of living in this situation. But they need to go back in a dignified manner as citizens, not once again slave in the concentration camps of Burma. We have Bob Roberts, we're gonna hear him. He's co-chair with the Faith Coalition with myself. We have Burma Task Force. So Burma Task Force organized the interfaith delegation. And we met in the Foreign Office of Bangladesh. Foreign Secretary was there of Bangladesh. He has their Bangladeshi ambassador to Burma was sitting next, and there were about 10 officers. And we were about 10, 12 people ourselves. Bangladesh Foreign Secretary was very clear in saying that we don't expect these people to go back to Burma. Very clear. And I even challenged him. He said, well, I don't care. I have 6 months at the job. If they fire me by saying this, that's okay. But then I went, met the UNHCR person who is in charge of education. I met Brock in charge of education. I met OIM in charge of education. Each one of them told me, Bangladesh will not change its policy of stopping education at 3rd grade level unless America pushes. Brothers and sisters, this program is for 2 purposes. One is we still need to get it declared genocide. And we are in communication with White House and different people. The State Department is still under reorganization. And they're saying that in principle, there is no problem, it can happen. 2 things we are looking for. Rohingya, allow them full education. There are people like Rais who in a kamikaze way are opening schools, hurting themselves and taking a risk of, these are secret schools. They're not allowed to be open schools, they are secret schools. Rohingyas are trying their best to teach each other as much as possible, but not legally. 600,000 cannot be taught in this particular way. So we need to open a system, and that will open when you volunteer, brothers. I'm not going to ask you for a single penny. Keep that for yourself and your families. But give me 5 minutes a day for next few weeks. And this can happen, inshallah. Lifting, $1.3 billion is given by the United States so far. $1.3 billion to take care of Rohingya refugees. If that money was distributed among the Rohingya people there, they could have done a marvelous job. Stop these restrictions on education. An educated Rohingya is good for herself, good for himself. Educated Rohingya is good for Bangladesh. An educated Rohingya is good for Burma. What is wrong with education? This can be done if we volunteer and push for it. Second thing is declaration of genocide. Canada has declared it a genocide. Bob Pecker is here. John is here. He was present there at ICJ. He contributed to that whole process. I was present there in the provisional decision. International Court of Justice did declare provisionally it's a genocide. United States, 2018, December, Congress, House of Representatives said it's a genocide, but State Department hasn't formally declared it. So to ask, let Rohingya learn in Bangladesh. Let's not lose the 3rd generation of Rohingya without education. Second, get it declared a genocide. These things, brothers and sisters, I can assure you are possible, but it will require it. And that's why we organize this program. And at this moment, I like Brother Adam to put program on hold. Everybody go online. Could you put it on chat somewhere? burmataskforce.org/volunteer. That is burmataskforce.org/volunteer. Please volunteer. If I have 200, 300 volunteers willing to give just 5 minutes a day, if you cannot do every day, maybe few times a week, 5 minutes. And we can make it happen, inshallah. So, Brother Adam, let's put a pause. Let's request everyone to go and sign up. Just sign up right now. I am a volunteer for this. Most people here who are present are volunteer for that. Could you please sign up right now? So I'm putting it right now on there, burmataskforce.org/volunteer. Just please write down your name, and there are a list of things what you could do. We'll take a few minutes, I'll keep talking, but please do this action item. if this one thing you could do, we will be able to guide. Brother Adam has a whole program. There are 5, 6 things which you can do, but it will require us to be able to communicate to you, because sometime vote comes in, and vote, when it comes in, I have seen in Congress, senator and congressperson running to vote because time is expiring and they have been late, not voting. So sometimes time is very short to make things happen. And that's why we need to be able to communicate with you. So we have online, Sister Hina just put in, Brother Wahid has just put in the link. Just click there and please sign up. Rohingyas have sabr. Rohingyas have resolved. They're very strong people. I mean, I can tell you in Chicago, there is more crime than the Rohingya camps. I walk morning until evening. I don't find people quarreling with each other. Very calm and collected people. In Chicago downtown, when I come out for lunchtime to go to mosque to pray, I hear a lot more noise, I can tell you this. These people are very good people, but they are subject to inhumanity. 2 generations lost without education, and 3rd generation to study, they have to get on board from Bangladesh to Malaysia if they're able to survive. And in Malaysia, they cannot, they will go on a boat to Australia if they can survive. And then they were put in the camps. Brothers and sisters, volunteer. Give me just 5 minutes of your time for next few weeks. Inshallah, this thing can be done. And this is the real thing which I need from you. So 2 more minutes. If you haven't signed it, I'm very happy to see Brother Dawood has signed in and Ghazala Javed has signed in. Thank you so much. Just go there and sign up right now. This is what is needed. Sign up so we can be a movement. You know, Burma Task Force is a coalition of 38 organizations, but organizations are big and they have many things to do. But it's individuals who are able to contribute. It is because of your phone calls and pressure, President Trump, who established a Muslim ban, during his era, we were able to get $1.3 billion for Bangladesh. Of course, a lot of Rohingya and other allies and everybody was making an effort, but it was possible because of your pressure. Otherwise, it would not have ever happened in Trump administration. That's the goodness of our country. That's the goodness of democracy, that citizens who are demonized like Muslims still are citizens and still can speak up and still can do things. So I like to give you confidence that this administration is willing to do it only if we make them do it. To make them do it, I need 5 minutes of your time. And thank you so much, Sister Mona have signed up, Brother Faris has signed up, and many people are signing up. Thank you so much. Brother Adam, back to you.
Okay, thank you, Imam Malik. And yes, as you mentioned, the next speaker will be Dr. Bob Roberts, trailblazer in the peacemaking and international religious freedom arenas, called upon by U.S. Department of State, United Nations, U.S. Islamic World Forum, World Economic Forum, and many other organizations for his groundbreaking work in the field. Dr. Bob Roberts is founder, Dr. Bob Roberts Jr., I should say, is founder and chairman of Global Ventures, Inc., and co-founder of Multi-Faith Neighbors Network, and Burma Task Force was honored by his participation in delegation visits to the Rohingya refugee camps in Cox's Bazar. Welcome, Reverend Bob.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be with you today. Imam Malik, you sound like a Baptist televangelist. Come on, I see that volunteer. Here's another name.
I believe in
Jesus. Bring it in, baby.
I believe in Jesus. You need to believe in Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Who will be even? I believe in Jesus. You believe in
got it going, man. I love you, Malik. So I don't hold it against me, people. I'm an evangelical. I'm just a happy one. And I'm an apolitical one. I believe in helping people more than I do promoting candidates. So 2 or 3 things I would just say to you. Number one, I believe in Malik and all that he's done. I'm Imam Malik, I'm sorry. I believe in him. I love him. I'm grateful for him and all that he does. And that's why I work with him. So 2 or 3 things I would say. Number one, we have to be done with this conversation about declaring genocide. It just needs to be done. I don't care if you're listening to CFR, the Brookings Institute, take your pick. Everyone knows that it's a genocide. We talk about what's going on in the world right now with American presence. And the truth of the matter is we've stumbled over ourselves in the past few years, both parties, over how we have handled global affairs. There's some things that are just easy. Declaring this a genocide is a no-brainer. It makes us kind of look dumb or behind the scenes or ignorant not to do that. I was so disappointed in Mitch McConnell. I just knew, I'm Southern Baptist, he's Southern Baptist. I just knew that, you know, we could push him and talk him and he would get on board with that. He wouldn't do it. And it's tremendously disappointing to me. The big deal was, well, Aung San Suu Kyi, it may create problems for her. Well, I don't want to create problems for Aung San Suu Kyi, but I don't want to ignore a million people either. That's wrong. And when I look at what's going on in our country, we need to do some of the no-brainers. We don't have the best image around the world. And this is an easy thing. Most Americans would agree upon. It needs to be done. There's been a bill in the Senate for years where it's both parties. It's ready to be done. And I would encourage the Biden administration to do it. This is, you're looking for things that are bipartisan. I honestly believe President Biden means it. Well, here's a no-brainer. Just do it. People aren't going to gripe. They're going to clap. Aung San Suu Kyi is no longer in power. So Mitch McConnell gives you a hard time. He gives everybody a hard time. Just do it. I think it's critical for us to respond to this. Here's a second thing I would say to you. And I love what Imam Malik was saying about volunteering. I think that's the key. The best way to get advocates for what we're doing, frankly, is when you get people that are volunteering and they're getting their hands dirty in a physical sort of way with Rohingya. They're doing medical clinics in the camps. They're doing educational clinics in the camps. It doesn't just help those that need education and health issues. It builds a loud coalition because it takes money to do this kind of work. And so you have to go to your donor base. And we're learning. We started an organization with Imam Majid and Muhammad and myself and Rabbi David Saperstein called Multi-Faith Neighbors Network. And we're mobilizing evangelical Christians, Muslims, and Jews to literally do humanitarian projects together. And we're finding it's having radical impact all over the US, Pakistan, Sudan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, I could go on. We need to do that here. We need to mobilize Muslims and Christians and Jews right here in the States to volunteer, because I know Imam Malik is just fine working with Christians and I'm just fine working with Muslims. As a matter of fact, I think it's a fantastic way of overcoming the fear that we have of one another. You know, when you're walking in a camp, and you're trying to help somebody, you just want to help them. You may be concerned about your faith, but if somebody's beside you and they're Muslim or a Jew, and they're saying, let's help this child, well, we're going to help that child. And so I think it's an opportunity. Second of all, I think to work with the Rohingya, there is an opportunity to do something that I think could really help put the Rohingya on a map in a very significant way, and that's this. We're going to see more and more persecution of Muslims and other religious minorities around the world. And so I look at what's going on with the Rohingya. There were challenges with Syrian refugees. We know what's going on with the Uyghurs and now the Afghans. And I think Rohingya provides an opportunity to build a global framework, not just for the Rohingya, but what is a transferable framework for all of these crises in the world. Now, I want to be careful what I say here because I may be ignorant to something, but I'm in Dallas, Texas, where one of the wealthiest and one of the preeminent man who helped put universities online is. And I guarantee you, if he knew about this, is there a way we can put schools online? Is there a way that on their mobile devices, I don't know. I don't know the details. It sounds like it's illegal to have schools in those in the camp, Malik, that we went to. I don't know. But is there a way that we could literally put elementary schools with Rohingya teachers that are here in the state teaching the classes? if we can, we've got the technology. Is there a same way to do that with the university?
Yes.
This young man, Imran, if I understand properly,
it is possible. The thing is that internet, they need high quality. Not everybody has it, but in smartphone, if they have a higher level of, instead of just 1G or 2G, if it is a higher one, they can remotely teach. The problem is they keep dropping the internet to the lowest possible level. So that mechanism of connection between them and education is also very difficult. It is part of our, education report, which Adam has very beautifully authored. We have defined that this element, if it is open, they are like people like Imran and Rais. I mean, these people are dedicated people. They know inside out. They can teach in their language. So sorry, since you asked me a question, I thought I should
thank you.
Right there.
Well, I'm just telling you, I'm ready to help you any way you need it. I mean, if I can help you with your university, if we can pay to get more power, but if it's taken away from us, I understand. But if we can pay for it, let's don't let money. We have technology now. This is a different world. So let's bypass as much of the powers that be that want to stop us to get to the grassroots. All I'm saying, I'm here to help for free. And I would like to mobilize Christians to work with Muslims to say, do you need money? Let's get money. Do you need internet? Let's get internet. Let's don't let anything get in the way. And thank you, Malik, for what you're doing. I'm committed. I'm here. We'll do whatever you want to do. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm back. We're going to show a video from some of our colleagues working with the refugees. This next video segment includes 3 speakers: Jessica Olney, independent researcher who's worked with BRAC University Foundation, followed by Dr. Alia Khan of Canada, who's very extensively involved in humanitarian projects. Her presentation will be followed by Saifullah Mohammed, a Rohingya youth activist in Canada. He's recently graduated from the journalism program and has gotten a master's in peace and conflict studies at the University of Waterloo. He's co-founder of the Canadian Rohingya Development Initiative. So I'd like to turn it over to the video next.
Yeah, I just wanted to use the last of my time to just really uplift the contributions of Rohingya refugee youth in Bangladesh, and also their motivation and dedication and curiosity. I've had the real honor of working in an educational and training capacity with hundreds of camp youth over the last few years. And these are some of the most motivated, curious, ambitious students that I've ever met. And coming from the US, where kids can take education for granted sometimes, I can assure you that if education becomes more accessible to youth in the camps, not a single person will take it for granted. And these will be some of the most dedicated students you can imagine. As Imran mentioned, there are students who speak a dozen languages. I mean, this is incredible. This is a resource, and it should be looked at as a resource. I think it's not in anyone's interests anywhere to deny education to these students. And the more that they have access, the more contributions they can make. This can also lead to livelihood and economic development, not only in the camps, in the local, regional, and national economy in Bangladesh and other refugee hosting countries. So we don't have to have antagonism around the issue of education. It should be looked at as something that will be good for everyone, everywhere. And there shouldn't be any hindrance to it. And yeah, I just want to uplift the role of both community educators and students. If they cannot access community learning spaces, they access learning resources online for self-directed study, which someone asked about in the questions. If internet access is not available in the camps, People will literally climb to a hilltop in the dark at night just to access internet to watch educational, videos on YouTube. That's the level of motivation that we're talking about. And so I just want to uplift that and, just echo the point that education will only help and it will only be mutually beneficial for all stakeholders, and no one is benefited by the denial of education.
Assalamu alaikum and peace be upon you all. I would like to thank the organizer for the hard work and dedications that you have put to make this important event a reality, and all for your support and solidarity toward the Rohingya people. Rohingya genocide didn't start on August 25, 2017, but yes, on that day, the Myanmar military launched clearance operations to systematically remove all the Rohingya people from their land by burning villages, killing and harming tens of thousands of people, and enacting sexual violence against the women and children. Nobody knows how we felt and suffered when we lost many innocent souls in Burma. If you visit in the camps in Bangladesh, there are widows, orphans, rape victims, all types of people you can see. Even though the government, military, civilians push us hard to driven us out of the country and kill our loved ones, we still stand in solidarity with the Burmese people and want to join to defeat terrorist military for an inclusive democracy. It is still our wish to forgive and forget, to move past this manufactured conflict and return to the peaceful state of cohesion that once worked for everyone in Burma. Earlier, there were military barriers, government policy hurdle, constitutional block. Now everyone is equal. Now we need each other, but I feel like we are still considered foreign bodies in a conflict zone. If you want to move the movement healthier, more participation is needed. At this moment, humanizing one another is very important. People in Burma are fighting for democracy, releasing their political leaders, and defeating the dictatorship. But we as a Rohingya have more than that on our plates. We are fighting for our recognition, identity, our citizenship, repatriation of 1 million Rohingya people, human trafficking, budgetary issue, education issue, healthcare issue, most importantly, the justice. All our hard work and contribution will only truly be realized when the Rohingya have their citizenship, peace, and freedom restored, and the perpetrators of such heinous crime are held accountable. This 4th anniversary of genocide commemoration will remind our moral obligation to act with the sincerity and honesty. The words "never again" is not enough. It needs serious actions for this terrible humanitarian crisis, so that the Rohingya people have the reason to live a life in this world. Thank you so much.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursaleen. Assalamu alaikum and greetings of peace to all of you. My name is Alia Khan, and I will be speaking today about the importance of education for the Rohingya children who are victims of genocide and are living in horrific conditions in the camps in Bangladesh. I will share my slides. So we know that the Rohingya people are victims of genocide and are currently stateless, and they have fled religious persecution. And we have seen the massive assault on the Rohingya people with the burning of hundreds of villages, beheadings and slaughter of men, women, and children, and mass gang rape of more than 80,000 women and girls. And 1 million Rohingya people fled on foot from Myanmar to Bangladesh. 60% of the refugees in the camp are children, many of whom are orphans. And these children are victims of severe violence, family separation, and many are living without any guardians and have no access to education. The conditions at the camps are horrific. They're overcrowded. There is insufficient water, food, clothing, and there are major concerns regarding safety, especially for young girls. Child trafficking is a major issue in the camps. And the children are in desperate need for food, shelter, and medicine. Education can provide life-saving knowledge and skills for disease prevention, self-protection, and awareness of rights. And education is a fundamental human right, and this has been enshrined under international and regional human rights laws. Every child has a fundamental right to basic education, and this will enable children to protect themselves and learn survival and life skills. And it can also provide psychological support to severely traumatized children. It is absolutely crucial for the rebuilding of the family and the community. And education will provide vocational training and technical skills, which are essential to improve their future. There are a number of challenges that we face. Bangladesh government has banned the use of the Bangladeshi school curriculum and the use of the Bangla language in educating the children, the Rohingya children. And the government has also not made provision for the Rohingya children to access formal education in Bangladesh. Currently, there's a lack of an approved curriculum, a limited supply of qualified teachers, and a critical need for space, materials, and funding. So what is the solution? The international community are responsible to support formal education for the Rohingya children. They are stateless and they're in desperate need. And we are part of the international community. Bangladesh should provide accredited programming, and we should advocate for this. But in the meantime, we have to step up and deliver private education. And we need to establish learning centers and provide education in the Rohingya language. And we have been working with Extreme Poverty Projects Canada in providing education for the children in the Rohingya, in the Rohingya language and also in English. And we are delivering grades 1 to 10 in the Rohingya refugee camps. And here are some pictures of the classrooms that we have set up. Grades 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But remember, there's 500,000 children in these camps. And so this is just a drop in the bucket. And we all need to be part of the solution to be able to meet the needs of all of these children in the camps. But it can be done. And if we work together and work collectively and sincerely to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, our efforts will be beneficial. And remember, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said that whoever amongst you sees an evil action, let him change it with his hand. And if he cannot, then with his tongue. And if he cannot, then with his heart. And that is the weakest of faith. Jazakumullahu khairan, my dear brothers and sisters. Assalamu alaikum. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik.
Yes, and I'm back. That was Sister Alia, and all the speakers addressed the sharpness of suffering and the urgency of the need for education. The next group of speakers are going to address international rules, laws, treaties that host countries should be following. They are breaking their own agreements by failing to provide education, and it's good to know about this. So I'll be showing the video with Debbie Stothard, founder of the Alternative ASEAN Network for Burma, journalist, organizer, and former Secretary General of the International Federation of Human Rights. Also, Fen Osler Hampson, the president of the World Refugee and Migration Council, and Bill Van Esveld, associate director of the Children's Rights Program of Human Rights Watch, as well as Chomtali Hok, associate professor of law at CUNY School of Law and founder editor of an innovative law and media nonprofit called Law at the Margins. Please.
I'm Debbie Stothard, founder and coordinator of ASEAN Burma. Most of Burma's neighboring countries have ratified the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and yet they still continue to block or restrict access to education for displaced Rohingya children and youth. This will prolong and intensify the impact of the Rohingya genocide. Campaigns and education programs to change the situation are critical to ensuring that the Rohingya community and survivors of this genocide are able to rebuild their communities and their future. Let Rohingya learn. Thank you.
As a United Nations organization, UNHCR is bound to abide by international law. And international law says any child, regardless of whether they have an ID document, regardless of whether they're a refugee or an illegal migrant or an asylum seeker or whatever, every child has the right to quality education without discrimination. So these things cannot be linked. Whether you have an ID card or not, under international law, if somebody is imposing that policy, they're violating international law. Now, I know this is a complicated question. Human Rights Watch just put out a report about how UNHCR is actually responsible for collecting biometric information from Rohingya people without telling them that they were going to share it with the Myanmar authorities that had persecuted them. So there are not necessarily clean hands here, but if that's happening, it shouldn't be. It's out and out illegal.
More than 400,000 Rohingya refugee children between the ages of 12 and 17 are being deprived of educational opportunities by the Bangladeshi government. For many of them, lack of educational opportunities comes at a crucial time in their own personal development. It's time for the government of Bangladesh to end its policy of restricting educational opportunities to Rohingya refugees. Although some international aid agencies have been permitted to teach Rohingya children, those efforts came to a standstill with the COVID pandemic. Funding for humanitarian assistance, including education, is also in decline. This year, only 34% of the required $1 billion in US dollars has been dispersed. And that funding situation will likely worsen as a new humanitarian crisis unfolds in Afghanistan. The Bangladeshi government's excuse that refugees will be returned to Myanmar within 2 years is not an acceptable justification for restricting access to formal education. The government has blocked efforts by humanitarian groups to construct proper school facilities in Rohingya camps. Temporary learning centers and classrooms are woefully inadequate. The government of Bangladesh has a clear legal obligation to comply with international standards. Those standards are clearly laid out in the Convention on the Rights of the Child and the Convention on the Rights of Migrant Workers. Both clearly state that all children should have access to education on an equal level as nationals of the country in which they reside. The government should also take immediate measures to provide better security for refugee women and girls and address the problems of sexual and gender-based violence.
Hi, I'm Shamtoli Huck. I'm an associate professor at CUNY School of Law in New York. I have, throughout my professional career, advocated for the human rights of all peoples, and specifically have advocated for the rights of Rohingya. Today, I want to specifically talk about the right of education for Rohingya children. The right to education has been recognized as a human right in a number of international conventions, including the International Convention on Economic, Cultural, and Social Rights, which recognized the availability of free education, secondary education for young people, regardless of where they are born. Education is a pathway to higher education and for economic opportunities. So educational right must be preserved, particularly for communities that have experienced persecution. Rohingya children deserve the right to an education. They deserve the right to be educated in their own language and culture. because they are being persecuted based on ethnicity, it is important that these cultures and language be preserved. Moreover, because eventually safe repatriation consistent with human rights is the goal, it is important to make curriculum choices that would be least disruptive to the education of Rohingya children. I defer to the teachers who know best on what that could look like. That may mean an education in Burmese, English, as well as Bengali. In the pandemic, the education is being accessed via the internet and remotely. So in addition, in order for Rohingya children to access their right to education, internet mobile service must not be blocked. They must have access to their classes via the internet. As a US-based Bangladeshi and law professor, it is important that the government of Bangladesh not obstruct the ability of Rohingya children to obtain an education. And it is up to the entire international community to support Rohingya children in this right. This is not the responsibility of only one nation, but that we all collectively must advance the rights to education for Rohingya children. Thank you very much.
And that's a strong reminder, of the, well, we could say education is a no-brainer, but that might not make sense logically. But it's obvious that education only benefits everyone concerned, and that it's absolutely a matter of right and justice, and that the struggle for justice, for education, are combined. So we have one more speaker before we are going to move into a discussion format, which we hope that John Packer will be joining. But our last scheduled speaker is Monia Mazi, a Canadian author and human rights activist. You may already know her. She was thrown onto the public stage in 2002 when her husband, Mahar Arar, was deported to Syria, where he was tortured and held without charge for over a year. I remember that very well. She campaigned tirelessly for his release, and in 2008, she published a memoir, Hope and Despair, about her pursuit of justice. In 2012, her novel, Mirrors and Mirages, was shortlisted for the Trillium Book Award in French. So welcome, Monia. And we saw you there somewhere. So Monia, if you can, someone can highlight you or spotlight you, that would be great. I see you. Yes, welcome. Assalamualaikum.
Thank you. Wa alaikum assalam. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you for all the work everybody has done to bring this event together, and for all the previous speakers that reminded us how important it is to speak for human rights, how important it is also to speak for education. I think everything has been said. I'm going to share with you some brief remarks to emphasize, basically, or to summarize what has been said and what probably we should do together. I come to you also from Ottawa, the land of the Algonquin and Ceded territories. And I come to you as an academic, as a human rights activist, but also as the secretary of the Ottawa Muslim Women Organization. And I know what we are doing is not probably a lot, but I would like to remind everyone that recently we have fundraised for the Rohingya women and children refugees. And through the tremendous help of Brother Rais, who was speaking to us on a video shortly, We were able to raise $10,000 that, inshallah, with God's help, is going to go to the education of purposely like for women and children. Yeah, 3 days ago on August 25th, we observed Genocide Remembrance Day. It is a sad day because we remember everyone who was killed, raped, displaced from their homes. We also come to remember our Muslim Rohingya brothers and sisters who were forced to flee their villages in Rakhine State in Myanmar after their homes were set on fire, their relatives killed, their women and girls raped at the hands of the Myanmar security forces. Entire township inhabited by the Rohingya across the Mangdo region went up in flames. But this is not, unfortunately, even if it is worse now, it is not true. It's not new, sorry. For decades, especially recent years, Muslim Rohingya have lived in fear, persecution, where the Myanmar authorities stripped them from their citizenship, as you know, in 1982, and denied them their basic rights to education, to live in dignity over there. We should also never forget how in 2017, crimes against humanity and acts of genocide were committed by these same military forces against innocent men, children, women, elderly people. Many of you have mentioned the number, the frightening number of almost 1 million, like less than 1 million of Rohingya who fled to Bangladesh and who are now staying in camp in total precarity, mainly in the Cox's Bazar region in Bangladesh. The United Nations has described the Rohingya as the most persecuted minority in the world, and this is terrible. And as much as it is terrible, it is very concerning. Today, as much as the question of repatriation of the Rohingya refugee from Bangladesh to their homelands in Myanmar looks still urgent and alive, it is being unfortunately overshadowed by the difficult situation of the Rohingya refugees in the camps in Bangladesh. What makes the question even harder and more complicated and delayed is the February, of course, military coup in Myanmar. Recently, Bangladesh State Minister for Foreign Affairs told some reporters that the issue is going to be delayed further, especially for this situation, political situation. So everything, as if everything conspired again, those refugees from Myanmar in Bangladesh to have their situation got worse and worse day by day. 2/3 of those who attempted dangerous journey from Bangladesh to other places or from Myanmar to Bangladesh are women and children. So people are still trying either to flee Myanmar or to flee Bangladesh. So the situation is still, again, very, very difficult. Many Rohingya refugees in Cox's Bazar camp fear that they will be moved, as some of you know, to Bashan Char, this low-lying Silt Island in the Bay of Bengal. Already 20,000 refugees have been displaced there, some of them by despair, some of them some sort of force, some of them because they have no other choice. In the camps, the Rohingya refugees are banned to build strong shelters, which put them even at greater risk of destruction during the annual monsoon season and at further risk for fires during the dry season. Despite all these concerns, the education remains very unorganized and random. And like mentioned, some of you mentioned even banned. Many children, especially girls, are not receiving any formal education. My friend, human rights activist, Rohingya activist, Raiz Monk, told me recently that when his local organization tried to set up classes in the camps for children, only 4 classes were formed until grade 6. Very few people, as you can imagine, would send their daughter to schools after that age for different reasons, maybe some traditional conservative reason, but also for safety and for concern about their safety in those places. There are some good news to share with you among all these sort of very discouraging and alarming situation. The Canadian government continued to provide international aid to the Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh. In its last federal budget, 2021, the Canadian government committed to $288 million for 3 years as humanitarian assistance to the Rohingya refugees. Karen Gould, the Canadian Minister of International Development, said that Canada will consider financial support for the Rohingya genocide case at the International Court of Justice. These are promising, hopeful, good steps. Nevertheless, there are many issues many of you spoke about that we need to emphasize and that we should really continue to call for, and especially here from my personal spot or for my personal activism in Canada. The education in the refugee camps is still a big concern. The safety in the camps, especially for women and children, is also a big concern. There are recent reports talking about women being assaulted, unfortunately. Also the information that some gangs are being at work in those camps. So this is really something to take with a lot of concern and a lot of quick response from the Bangladeshi authority, of course, and from the international community. Dr. Alia spoke about the vocational training centers. I would add my voice to that. It is important to teach the kids how to talk, how to write, read in different languages, but also to keep really the teaching at a trade, at a skills sort of teaching, so they can support themselves. So we have seen women learning how to sewing. These are very important. We should continue asking for this as well in the meanwhile. Development of culturally sensitive curriculum. This is key. We have heard that they are following, the children so far are following the Burma curriculum. It is important that a special culturally sensitive curriculum should be taught to those children in the camp so they can learn about their tradition, they can learn about their religion, they can learn about their history, as all these are strong components to build their identity and continue seek justice for their rights eventually. Finally, it is worth to mention that following the military coup, some pro-democracy groups formed in what they call the National Unity Government of Myanmar. This is what they call also the government in exile. So last June, this National Unity Government issued a statement accusing the military of crimes against humanity, war crime against Myanmar people on the basis of race, religion, sexual orientation, or political beliefs. This is a reminder, very sad reminder of the situation. However, this can be seen despite some still unclear, very general wording. The statement is considered by many as a good step in the right direction. So perhaps, I personally think that Canada should open some diplomatic channels with some of these politicians who made those promising statements, and make explicit demand about the inclusion of some Rohingya women representation in this government in exile, and keep pushing and pressuring the international community so that the right of the children, the right of all the Rohingya people in education, in living in dignity, are not forgotten and are going to always be a source of concern, but also a source of hope for the coming future. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you, Sister Monia, and that was rousing and inspiring. Reminds me that this week, during another event, I was able to ask a question of the new National Unity Government Minister for Human Rights. I asked him about education of Rohingya, and he said everything that we would want to hear. but again, they are not in power. And he is not necessarily representing every person from his party either. And so at least it was a little bit a ray of light, and it gives us something to work on. So we have to find all of these opportunities to push our concerns and to build some hope for the Rohingya, both in Burma eventually and in the camps where they're living now. So we've heard today from a lot of speakers, it's really a community of activists, of leaders, working in partnership. And I should acknowledge that the organizers are a partnership between our US office of Burma Task Force and our Canadian office as well. And you may have noticed a number of Canadian speakers. And so I think that's very important. We need to coordinate, we need to work together. So for the last part of this panel today, there will be a bit of a discussion that I hope our chairman, Imam Malik, will host, discussing a little bit, reviewing and discussing what can be done. I hope Sister Hannah Zuberi, our DC office, our Justice for All director, and will join, and also Professor John Packer, speaking of Canada. He's Associate Professor of Law and Director of the Human Rights Research and Education Center at the University of Ottawa. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Imam Malik, to host this last section. And I hope there can be some discussion, maybe for 10, 15 minutes, as long as you want. So
okay,
over to you.
Well, thank you so much for all of you. For a large number of people are watching on Facebook and YouTube as well, and good number is here. The bottom line is that, crises keep coming up, and there are many causes Muslim work on. But we're looking for some of you to give us some time in next few weeks. So sign up as burmataskforce.org volunteer, and I will keep making that pitch. But may I ask Professor John Baker, which I have seen have been singularly focused on providing the academic depth to the argument of genocide. John, take a few minutes before we start welcoming questions.
Thank you very much, Imam Malik, and thank you for the initiators of this event, and also the contributors who were all very elegant and earnest and impassioned and persuasive. Of course, for me, I'm convinced already that all that needs to be done, and so I think it's important that we persist now. And some things are coming together which are important. Before I forget, let me also congratulate Saifullah for completing his master's degree, and I look forward to his ongoing writings. Just on the question of recognition of genocide and why it matters, allow me, first of all, to clarify that, as was pointed out, that the US Congress and the House of Representatives in particular, previously, long ago, recognized in 2018 by an almost unanimous vote. I think it was one vote against, if I recall, the recognition of genocide against the Rohingya. And I understand that there was a majority in the Senate, including a number of Republican senators who wrote collectively a letter pressing the then Trump administration to recognize. But at the time, as Bob Roberts pointed out, Mitch McConnell refused to allow the vote on the floor of the Senate. And that was because he was concerned about protecting his friend, Aung San Suu Kyi, who was then the nominal head of was the actual foreign minister of Myanmar, and was in some kind of an apparent transition, hopefully to more government and so forth. So that fact, it has totally changed, of course, as a result of the coup d'etat on the 1st of February, which is an entirely illegal coup d'etat. There is no doubt that this is simply a gang, a junta, led by Min Aung Hlaing, General Hlaing, who is also personally responsible for the genocide. Aung San Suu Kyi, all her hopes and aspirations, of course, have been essentially laid bare and undermined and turned over, and she is now facing long-term incarceration and sanctions. But moreover, the National League for Democracy and it's more specifically the National Unity Government, which it comprises, has acknowledged the genocide and has, as was just mentioned, committed to taking steps to repair and to take all the steps necessary to hold those who are individually responsible and for the state to take its responsibility. So there is no longer an obstacle that Mitch McConnell had in mind that could have been an obstacle. In fact, to the contrary, it is no longer consistent, even with Aung San Suu Kyi and the NLD, to obstruct that vote in the Senate. More than that, the United States of America is now looking really spectacularly inconsistent because the Biden administration has acknowledged, has recognized the Uyghur genocide on, frankly, a much shorter time period, much less evidence, a lot of evidence in my opinion, but less than in the case of the Rohingya, which is really overwhelming decades of public available information. So let me just give you 3 reasons why a recognition of genocide of the US government administration is crucial and really needs to be sooner than later. First of all, the fact of the matter is that the United States of America, for better or for worse, as some may say, is still the leader of the democratic world. And the position of the United States of America, when it is hesitant, uncertain, or lagging, then that creates a kind of excuse for weaker, smaller states that may be uncertain. In this case, countries like Canada have recognized genocide, some others like France and others too, but their backbone is not as steeled in the absence of the USA being uncertain. So the first and foremost reason is that when the United States of America were to, should it declare, others will not only be steeled in their positions, but many others will follow. So this is the first reason. The second reason is that there are consequences which follow from a recognition of genocide. There are legal consequences. We see this in the case of the Uyghur genocide. There will be immediately implications for trading, for business activities, because it is illegal to contribute to or be complicit in or simply to be passive in the light of a duty to prevent genocide, to prevent its ongoing nature or its possible organization or conduct. So the consequences are substantial. And we know that right now, to interrupt the trade benefits that the junta business benefits are gaining, that would be a huge consequence of designating the genocide. And the third reason I want to emphasize why the Biden administration must now declare genocide is that in the light of the case at the International Court of Justice, which is proceeding, it would absolutely expose the top Madao, because now the National Unity Government and the NLD have distinguished themselves, have identified themselves as not part of and not responsible for this regime. And so in the International Court of Justice, it would be sensible that the United States of America and many others would now support the process on the side of the Gambia, ask for publicity and public information in the process, and make very clear that the top Madao are those that actually bear the responsibility and will be held accountable. So those are 3 important reasons why the United States of America and the Biden administration should be called upon vigorously to recognize the genocide. And finally, let me just say, I so support all the remarks about education. Ultimately, education and all the efforts to work together in this regard are vital for the continuation of the vitality of the Rohingya as a people, as a community. And so I support that. Thank you very much for everything everyone is doing, and thank you for allowing me a few minutes to speak.
Thank you so much, John. If you have any questions, please type in the chat box and we will attend to that. While you're doing that, Hina, could you please take a few minutes to guide people what need to be done? You know, may I request Dr. Abdul Wahid to please put in the chat box the whole report. Brother Adam, with the help of many people, have I think about 50, 60-page report about the state of education. Each one of you need to pick up and provide to your congressperson that particular report, as well as, educate yourself. But the main thing is to volunteer. So please put that on. And Hina, please go ahead and share your thoughts.
Thank you so much for putting this program together, Brother Adam, and the rest of our team. Always amazed by all the work that gets done at, mashallah, Justice for All. As our children are headed back to school, many parents are out back to school shopping, making sure they've got backpacks and all. And imagine those same feelings all the moms and dads, grandparents here, that Rohingya parents have as well. And I know many of you reach out and say, what can we do aside from sending money? What can we do? And there's so much you can do. I'm just going to put down 4 just action items that people can take today. One is a petition that is to Sheikh Hasina, who is the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, requesting her to as the mother of Rohingyas, as she's been called around the world, to let her children learn. And we would like you to not only just sign this, but also let's make this viral. Let's get thousands of signatures. Let's get real push on this. It's a global petition. Anybody anywhere in the world can sign it just to get some attention on it. And so I'd like everybody here to at least commit to get 10 people to sign it, share it in your WhatsApp groups, on your Facebook page. Let's get this going. The second is a organizational letter. This is a letter that is just organization based. So if you're a part of a masjid or for church or an NGO, a nonprofit, a school, please get your leadership to sign this letter. This is something that we have done this before, and it's gotten attention in Bangladeshi press, Bangladeshi media, so to put that pressure on the Bangladeshi government. So that's another thing. So that's the second link that we've shared. The third thing that we'd ask you to do, and this is extremely important because behind the scenes, this report that we've shared this with the entire Congress and Senate. We are following up with meetings on almost a daily basis with Appropriations Committee, the Foreign Relations Committee, Congress people, senators, trying to get them to push the State Department. Basically, what we're asking, just as is noted in the report, is that donor countries continue to convey the gravity of the ongoing crisis to our European and Indo-Pacific allies and to push for multilateral economic and diplomatic pressure on Burma, as well as continued humanitarian support for those in need. But along with this, we want monies for education to be earmarked so that when our tax dollars are being sent over to Bangladesh, that a certain amount of money is earmarked for education and continued US support to be conditional on such funds being properly spent. The US should directly fund and evaluate educational programs in partnership with Rohingya teachers in the camp. As major donors such as Canada and US, our partnership should not be limited to UN agencies or with the local government. Civil society has a crucial role to play, and we commend grassroots efforts made by Rohingya people themselves, but this must be considerably scaled up to be effective. We should work to empower such Rohingya self-reliance, and we not discourage it as the current policies do. Now imagine this message being sent out by your Congress people to the State Department, by the State Department to Bangladesh. And this doesn't happen in a vacuum. It needs pressure. When we walk into offices, on Zoom these days, they will tell us oh, we've heard from XYZ constituents. We need constituents to be calling. So please, on Monday, set your calendar, just daily make a call. I mean, it doesn't take too much of your time. We've got the script ready. Just pick up the phone and tell your congressperson to call the State Department. Aside from this, and we want to make sure that the education is for boys and for girls. And attention should be paid to educational needs of host nations, especially the most immediate vicinity to the camps as well, because we do not want people in Cox's Bazar to resent the Rohingya. So it would be great to spread that love of education. Many kids in Bangladesh themselves are suffering from a lack of education as well. So basically that's the main, obviously volunteer. Once you volunteer, then we know we can count on you, that you can send this message out to other people in your communities. And look out for, this link is for the United States, and on Monday you'll be receiving Canadian folks, inshallah, especially if you volunteer, will be receiving the Canada-based email or calling tool link. So that's it from my end. And I really, really hope that we can, just as God has told us that you feel for your brothers and sisters, you want for your, right? We will not get to that level of bir unless we want for them as much as we want for ourselves. So, keep that in mind when you're dropping your kids off to school or sending them off to university and college, inshallah. And writing those checks, right? So inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much, Sister Hina, who does a whole lot of things for Justice for All. She joined Burma Task Force 3 years ago. Thank you so much. I mean, those things which need to be done, 3 items are clearly written there in the box. And the 4th item is volunteer. So we can tell you as things come in. So it is important for you to please sign up. We're not going to take a whole lot of time. I like to conclude. I'm looking at the chat box. I didn't see any questions for anyone. So at this moment, we'd like to conclude by thanking each one of you who has made presentation. And thank you so much for being here and accepting our invitation. And we learn from you, a lot of things which have been said. A lot of people are trying to do things. There are many, many causes in our country and around the world. And it's not easy to bring a cause like Rohingya up, because there are not many Rohingyas in this country. And those who are here, they're struggling to meet the basic needs. And so those of Rohingyas who are actively working in this area, may Allah bless them, give them strength, and they continue to take this cause. And rest of us allies, I think this is very doable thing right now. Both things, getting it declared genocide, it's a doable thing. I'm in conversation with White House. The State Department is still trying to organize itself better because it was, quite a bit not quite ready after the Trump administration. So more things are happening in the National Security Council, which is in the White House and in the White House. And right now they are probably, is all bogged down by the situation in Afghanistan. But if we can start building it up bit by bit, this thing can happen. And I'm hearing from them. And $1.3 billion is not a small money, which United States has given, and Canada has given $300 million. So I think there is some leverage which exists if we keep pushing. There is no reason whatsoever to keep people illiterate. So please sign up, copy the material which is already there, and may God bless you. May God bless Rohingya people. And may God bless everyone who is striving for freedom, justice, and equality. وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
God bless you, Malik.